visual art is just another dimension of philosophy. And so in this question of separating the art from the artist is a different way of saying, like, can you separate the philosophy from the philosopher?
Yeah,
Which that one is even more tricky, I think.
I
But to
agree.
start with my opinion on visual art, I feel like, and the same goes for music, actually. Music is a really good example of this. Um, so, my general opinion on whether you can separate the art from the artist is, generally speaking, yes, if they're dead. No, if they're still alive and still profiting from me supporting them.
Mm,
Like, and here, music is a good example, I think.
yeah,
Because it's like Michael Jackson had some sketchy stuff, you know,
yeah,
in terms of like, you know,
yeah,
but he's
yeah,
dead. And so, I mean, I don't listen to Michael Jackson really, but like, if his song came on shuffle, I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't. That's just
yeah.
my opinion. But versus someone like R. Kelly or like
Right.
Diddy. Diddy makes music? What does he do?
Yes, yeah. He's a producer, and so that's even
Like
this
they could
adds
profit from it if I'm
right,
supporting them. And so then it's like I could actively be contributing to like the fund of his lawyer to get him, you know.
right.
So, and
Yeah,
so then it's like if I'm actively supporting someone like financially or even just like, supporting them by
yeah,
consuming their media that they make or appreciating their art, and they're actually like a terrible person, then it's like you appreciating their art is like indirectly condoning what they've been doing. That's my current opinion on it. It's still open to change, and that's mostly like with visual art and music. I think that works. With philosophy, I think it gets a little bit more complicated, and in that case, you actually have to analyze the philosophical texts or interviews or whatever themselves to see like, is this a worldview that reflects really problematic personal beliefs?
yeah.
And obviously, Heidegger is a perfect example of this because he was a member of the Nazi Party for a few years in like the 30s, I think, and like got a promotion at his university because of it. And so, that's complicated because it's like, okay, well, he had these other incentives. He left soon after, but he never publicly denounced it, you know? Like
Yeah.
after he like left, he wasn't like, guys, wait, we need to think about
Really
this.
bad.
And then
Yeah.
after the war, he didn't really, I mean, I think there's one part in an essay where he compares the Holocaust to like global warming. So yeah, just like weirdness. And I think that's obviously bad. But at
Right.
the same time, as someone who's read Being in Time multiple times, I think the argument that it can be interpreted as like a National Socialist worldview is I can't see it there, or like a fascist worldview. I can't really see it
Yeah.
there. But it's worth doing. And even if it's like, oh, I like this philosopher's ideas, you can't turn away from the ugly sides of their life and of their beliefs
Yeah.
because it's important to kind of do that practice of saying like, can this be separated? And if it
Right.
can, we can work with those ideas, and if it can't, then that also needs to be called out. That's my
Yeah.
stance on it, I think.
No, I think I agree for the most part. There's a few things that I'm like, "Ooh, I want to parse out this specifically because I agree with you that it's like supporting people who are profiting off of it. Generally, it's like, no, we don't want to support bad people. And because of the way that people can profit off of art and off of philosophy, when they're alive, we need to be really careful about that. But also, it's like, I wonder, based on like people's estates and what they've left money to,
Yeah.
just as you were saying that, I'm like, that gets really complicated with
It's
like,
another nuance for
it's
sure.
not fair to like the son should not have to atone for the sins of the father or whatever. But if there are people who were alive when they were alive and were condoning and supporting horrible actions, like I don't want them to profit from
Right.
their name profiting either. But then you have to do a bunch of research about anyone that you ever support and like their estate and the finances and their will and all of this stuff. But I think I agree with what you said that it's like it's another nuance there. The other thing that came up for me was the can you separate art from the artist versus should you separate art from the artist? Because I think there are some circumstances where I feel very much like for a long time with Michael Jackson's actually a great example for me because it's like I knew that there was like controversy and questions around certain things and like did this happen, and for a really long time I was like I don't really know, I love his music, we're gonna just not think about it. um and that to me is like, so I personally can separate that art from artist, but should I have been is the
Mm-hmm.
question there. I recently, like a year or two ago, watched a documentary that almost unequivocally proved to me that Michael Jackson like was a pedophile and
Yeah.
assaulted many young kids. And since then, I have just not been able to listen to
Yeah.
his music. And it's
Yeah.
like, even if I hold the opinion that we should be able to, I feel like I can't in this one circumstance, right? And I think that's actually kind of become true of me for Kanye too. Like if I hear a
Yeah,
Kanye
Kanye is also
song
a great example
out, I'm
because he's
like
like actively, and his music also is like,
in
you know,
like the popular zeitgeist very
yeah,
commonly. And it's like if I hear a song out, it's like, and it's horrible because so many of his early songs, like he is obviously a very talented artist,
hmm,
but he has said atrocious violent things and done atrocious violent things. And it's like my mind and like heart just can't, I'm like when I hear it now, all I can hear are the horrible things that he said. And I think it's interesting because it's different to say, like, it actually gets into the complication of living out your philosophy versus what you hold to be true. Because it's like in this scenario, I could even hold to be true, like,
hmm,
you should be able to separate art from the artist. I can't all the time, you know? And that still be like, and you still get to make that choice, you know, if you want to live that out or not. But there is, I think it gets important for people who do philosophy, especially how we do philosophy and the way we are arguing that people should do philosophy, that it should be lived, it should be practiced. And I think that's part of why this question gets so complicated, is because there are very direct consequences for all of us, especially when it comes to music, but also like just going to a museum. It's like by paying for a ticket at a museum that has like a piece of art from someone who was um a bad person, let's say. Like at what point, where do you draw that line that the
hmm,
separation must happen? And then also, where do we not want to like support versus critique, right? Because also, in order to like, I could so see an argument where someone is like, let's take a look at the course of Kanye's music and see if we can analyze like his
yeah,
psychology through
that would
the
be
art
cool.
he's created.
I'd read that.
And
I'd read that paper. If someone wrote a
right?
paper about that.
Yeah, it's like that would actually be really interesting. And is there something we can learn from his art that we can, as a society, take a lesson from that is like, okay, we need to do XYZ better, or we need to put these protections in place for art that's being created for people who get famous. Like how do you detect like mental health through someone's art, you know, like all sorts of stuff. That it's like I think that that's a worthwhile project as well, but because he's alive, then you get that wrinkle in it too.
Yeah. I have a couple points about
Yeah.
what you just said. Could I go grab my other headphones?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
So, 80%. I hate having ADHD. This is so annoying. Oh, it's so fun being neurodivergent. I'm so quirky and fun.
I'm not like other girls.
I'm not like other girls. I can't find something that I literally set down like 2 seconds ago. Okay. um, so first of all, I totally agree with your point that like even if an artist is dead, there's the issue of like the family estate, you know? Like I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I'm thinking of
Yeah.
like Picasso, terrible person, like like a super abusive monster from what I know. And I'm sure there's distant family members that are still responsible. I don't know, again, I don't know the ins and outs, but that's kind of a murkier situation because again, it's like the family members didn't do anything about it.
Right.
Or like they didn't do the stuff that he did, you know. So they're not directly responsible for the people that he harmed. Um, but there is still something that's a little like, ugh, you know, that
Yeah.
needs to be untangled. I think there it definitely gets more nuanced than like the further away you get from the direct relationship between the artist profiting from their art, it gets more and more nuanced and more complicated. And also probably more and more like context specific, you
Yeah.
know? Like each
Yeah.
situation is going to kind of pan out differently, I'm sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
think in this more, I think obviously the art and the artist is different than this, but it also kind of makes me think of the conversation around reparations a little bit. Are you okay?
so yeah, sorry, my oh God, my headphones made a beep. No, actually it was more like a yeah.
That was a satisfying tone. I liked that.
Thanks.
Um, but like this
That's what I was going for.
conversation,
I was like, Reese will like this if I mimic the headphones.
I did like it. You were right. I actually did really enjoy it. So,
Well, I'm glad.
um,
Okay, sorry, what were
but
you saying?
no, you're good. This conversation around reparations too. That's like, okay, is there some sort of thing that like Picasso's great grandchildren should do to make right um the harm to other people's
Yeah. And
ancestors, right?
could they even if
Is there
they
something?
like
Yeah.
I don't especially in that situation I'm like that wouldn't even really make sense because what would it be like, "Hey, sorry your great grandma was like abused." Like sorry that Picasso was like an abusive partner or something. I don't know, like to me I'd be like, "Okay, like that doesn't really at least that's my first impression. I'm like, would those sort
Yeah.
of reparations actually be helpful?" And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that was just another thought that
No,
I wanted
no,
to add
but
in, but
yeah. But yeah, that part's definitely nuanced. And then with Picasso, it's like I'm not the, you know, you can get mad at me in the comments. I don't care. I'm not the biggest fan of Picasso, like in terms of his actual work. I think, like, obviously, like in terms of art, I know, crazy, sue me, but don't actually. I don't know, but
don't, please.
please don't.
I
I'm
promise I have
sorry.
no money.
No money. Look at me. I'm trying to sell my art. I have no money. Please don't sue me. But uh like in terms of art history, obviously a super influential, important figure. But in terms of how his work actually likes, I'm not the biggest fan. It's not my favorite. And so I feel like it's a lot easier for me to criticize Picasso for who he was as a person. But like Caravaggio, for example, pretty sure he like murdered, didn't he murder two people? Let me
Did
look
he?
this up.
That
What? I just heard this on the internet. A
see,
murderer.
and
Murderer.
then
But there, I'm like, I say it to people. Yes, Caravaggio was a murderer. Um,
holy guacamole.
yeah, apparently had some, maybe it wasn't two people, maybe it was just one. Um, he was sentenced to beheading for murder.
Oh my gosh. Well,
according
and
to
see,
Wikipedia.
I think this
A
even adds
notorious
in
criminal and murderer.
a notorious
Yeah,
criminal and murderer is crazy.
quick
But
to injure people.
it adds in this other layer too of like what you don't know, right? And it's like I
Yeah.
think we're really quick to forgive people.
But like, well, I was just gonna say that like I like his art, and
Same.
and and so they like I've caught myself telling people that like it's a fun fact in the like and that's like very different from the way I talk about Picasso. Like I'll be like, did you know Caravaggio murdered? You know he was a murderer? Like it's a fun fact or something. So it's like it's a different sort of recognition of a problematic past than I have with Picasso.
Yeah.
And I think that's also interesting. Like
Yeah.
the should versus can. Like with I mean really with neither of them I reached that point where like I can't help but like I can't look at their art. You know, like
Yeah.
you were saying like
Yeah.
I can't, I'm able to and then the question is like should I?
Yeah.
But then, like with the Michael Jackson interview, you get to this point where it's like, I can't.
I just can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is
And maybe that point
interesting.
is different for everyone.
Yeah, I think so because I think it is like emotional to some extent, right? It's like what does that conjure up in you? And I think also like how much you relate or feel connected to certain artists. I think it can also create this feeling of like betrayal almost in a weird parasocial way.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
least that's kind of what I felt with Michael Jackson because I grew up loving his
Yeah.
music.
Yeah,
Like
me too. My
I
mom was obsessed.
yeah, and it's like it was always on the radio and you hear it and it's fun and like you dance to it and then hearing this and knowing how it's like, oh yeah, you hear about it, but it's like that was the first celebrity that passed away that it was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a celebrity passing away because I think we were what like 8 maybe when
But you
he
mean like in
died,
terms, yeah, yeah.
that it was like this really impacted me and then
Yeah.
being an adult who has this relationship with his art, I think it hit me harder almost.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what you're saying, how it's like when you really like someone's art, it's both easier to forgive them and also if it feels really personal, it's like the people closest to us can hurt us the deepest or whatever, that it's like that sounds silly
No,
when
that
it's
sounds silly, but that's actually, I think that's actually right. You
yeah.
know? Like,
That it's
where
like
it feels like a breach of trust almost, where it's like, how could you
yeah.
where it's like
Hi,
spinach made a guest appearance where it's like oh how could you do this to me, you know, like where
Yeah.
it's like a drastic shift of your beliefs about a person and like
Right.
oh I thought I knew this person to be like this but now I'm coming into contact with all this information that's like drastically like shattered that previous worldview.
Right. Yeah. I think too, another distinction I want to draw, because I do think with this question of like supporting financially and like how it's similar to reparations, there is a difference because of course like the question of reparations is oftentimes tied to enslavement in the American South and even though slavery happened everywhere, but that's often what's talked about with this. I think it's notable that a big difference here is that art is being created versus like in enslaving people, it's just harm being done. And I think that's the other piece that is difficult with separating art from the artist, that is like there's this other thing that it's like, should I be able to appreciate this like, is it a third thing or is it deeply connected? But
Yeah.
with art, it's like we have this deeply personal relationship, like artists, in the way that we as human beings talk about creativity and our relationship to art. It is deeply personal, and it is like I have this relationship to, like, even our last episode talking about poetry and the way that, you know, it's about our personal experience and things that we've gone through. That to me is much harder to separate someone from than like hotel art, right? That
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't really,
Or even like any type of art, really, I would say.
yeah, just because
Because it's
art, the nature
yes.
of art is so much more personal that it's like it's not like there's this thing that's separate to you. it's like, doesn't it capture some of you in it a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is this another layer, as we're talking about
Yeah.
layers with this.
Yeah, it's like the John Berger quote, like every image is a way of seeing,
Yeah.
you know?